We're Monday, January 27th, and this is the Basu and Godin Notebook. Hello, Arpin.
Hey, okay.
Yeah, let's get my FM voice today.
Yeah, that's it. You have a traffic report? You have a traffic report waiting?
That's it. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Huh?
And weather? Only hits. Only hits to play.
Weather. Yeah. Yes.
All right.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. We don't have a traffic report, but we do have some stuff to talk about.
We'll have an injury report later on.
We'll have an injury report later on, sure. But yeah, it's the Canadiens are hitting sort of an interesting part of their season. They've made a push that none of us saw coming, which led into an inevitable lull, which is what they're in now. And now their next test is to get out of that lull and to make sure it doesn't last that long. So we thought we'd take a look at kind of where the Canadiens are. They have seven games remaining before the Four Nations face-off break, which is a unique wrinkle to this. Martin St. Louis was asked after practice today when he gets to take a day off, and he thought, maybe during the Four Nations I might get to take one day off. So up until then, there's some things that need fixing for sure. And so Monday the Canadiens practice almost the full team. No Josh Anderson again. No Caden Gooley. Two guys who are just perpetually banged up did not practice, but otherwise Martin St. Louis had his full complement of guys practicing. And I was ready to dissect exactly what they were going to work on. What aspect are they? We're finally going to get the reveal of what Martin St. Louis wants to fix on this team. And he just had like a very normal run-of-the-mill practice. There was no specific area that seemed to be emphasized over anything else.
Game scenarios.
Game scenarios. Yeah, game scenarios. And it's a practice that they've done before. I asked a couple of the guys, and oftentimes when I'm trying to draw meaning out of practice, I'll go to the guys and be like, okay, what was the point of emphasis? Because sometimes when they do a drill, it's hard to tell if this is an offensive drill, if it's more of a defensive drill. What's the actual area of focus there? And most of the time the guys will give it up. But today, invariably, guys said, that's just kind of a typical detail-oriented execution practice. We've had that practice before. The exact drills that they did before. You had a lot of forechecking based and possession based drills. What to do on puck recoveries, how to play with it deep in the offensive zone, how to defend that. It's obviously the counterpart to it, but I found it interesting that there was no, when Martin St. Louis attacked the forecheck last season, 4 straight practices, it was clear that all they were working on was the forecheck. When he did the defensive zone earlier this season, 3-4 practices, obviously working on defensive zone play. The fact that there was no obvious takeaway from practice today, I found to be an interesting sort of development in where the Canadiens are.
Yeah, absolutely, because it shows that they're not necessarily trying to extinguish a fire. It's more, and it's not an urgency into teaching certain aspect of the game. It's let's go back to what we've taught you and that you might have just strayed away from. And those concepts that you are all familiar with, let's just take a practice to go back to that. There's this word that we keep hearing, repetition. Now we give guys some reps at practice. Where repetition, in the word repetition, there's the word repeat. So basically it's repeating what's already been taught, what's already been viewed in video sessions, notions that players know about. Marty, after the game on Saturday, said, when I hear them talk on the bench, they know exactly what we're trying to do, and they point to each other aspects where they can get better, but they're all very aware of our system, our way of playing. So basically, these reps at practice that are very valuable and very rare at this time of the year, are just it's like a refresher. Like at the end of a session for a student, like this is you're just going over your material before another exam, and so it's good because it means that the Canadiens are at a different stage than they were maybe even after the first month of the season, and definitely
Mhm.
compared to last year.
Yeah, and so, but even with that sort of generic practice, I think there are some things about, because the big difference for Marty right now is that when you do that, when you tell your team, let's go back to our basics or our principles, um, you have the advantage of success. You have the proof that these principles worked for us. They're the reason we are in the position we are in today. So going back to them makes a lot more sense than if you're going back to principles that led to you losing a lot. So that added benefit, I think, is something else that gets accentuated when Marty begins a practice. And let's be clear, like this was, I looked at it last night, but they practiced on January 2nd in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, they basically had 3 real practices. I'm not counting last week's practice because there were 6 guys missing and they couldn't really do any of the things that Marty wanted to do. And he compared it to a youth practice. Didn't really see the value in it other than just getting your legs going. So today was really kind of, one of the only, it's basically the 4th practice in the new year, or since that practice in Chicago on January 2nd, where Marty was able to actually do things to address issues. And while there was nothing specific done, what's clear is, the Canadiens' puck possession has waned for sure. If you use, shot attempts is a bit of an antiquated way of looking at how a team is playing, but it is still a pretty good gauge of puck possession. And, over the last 3 games, they've been outshot attempted by something like 50 shot attempts in 3 games, so it's really, and there's a lot of things that come out of that. I asked Nick Suzuki about the power play today, and he brought up that they only had 1 power play last game. So he's like, what are you really nitpicking? Like that power play wasn't very good, but are you really going to dive in on 1 power play? So I think the issue is, when you don't have the puck that often, you're not going to draw penalties. Like that's a side effect. So when you see Marty doing drills where guys are going in to collect dump-ins, whether they're rims, whether they're flip-ins, and then they do it again and again and again and again. They do the repetitions on puck recoveries, and what they're doing out of those puck recoveries, different sets that they can do in terms of how they run their forecheck, what areas of the ice they're going to, where they're going to try to emphasize placing the puck on first touch and things like that. Did a lot of drills on reloads, quick reloads, going back into the offensive zone from the neutral zone, which comes off of their rush defense, which he talked to you about as being a key component of preventing teams from getting into their end. So all of these things lead to possession time, and it's something that I think that the Canes have been lacking of late, and they've survived. But for sure, it's not been clinical the way it was during the height of this run when they were sort of beating these high-powered teams on the road and really dictating the pace of those games in many cases. Whereas I would say the Tampa game was dictated largely by Tampa. The Detroit game was definitely dictated by Detroit. And even the New Jersey game was by and large dictated by New Jersey. And I think there's a recognition that they need to dictate the pace a little bit more, and that pace needs to be higher. And so that was addressed in practice, but that's watching them go through those drills was reminiscent of sort of some of the games that they've played since the Christmas break, where they were really controlling the nature of the game, and that control has left them a little bit of late. And so trying to recapture that, I think that was the first step, was practice Monday, to sort of get back in the driver's seat when they're playing. And And that starts from the first period, and that's been another trend of late is these slow starts. And against New Jersey, it wasn't a slow start, but it was a bad first period on the whole. I thought they were controlling play for the first 6, 7 minutes of that game, and then they gave it back to New Jersey. But these are elements, these are benefits when the things they worked on in practice, puck recoveries, quick reloads, possessing pucks in the offensive zone, you control bigger parts of the game when you do these things consistently.
Yeah. Regarding the New Jersey game, I thought that they started very well. The thing is just that they couldn't hit the net. They missed very good opportunities at
Mm-hmm.
creating scoring chances, but they just missed the net entirely. And the game started to flip after the first TV timeout, which leads me to suggest that Sheldon Keefe did a very good job at identifying aspects of the game where the Devils could make adjustments right away. And with each TV timeout in the first period, they would come back stronger, and they took
Mm-hmm.
over the second half of the first period and for much of the second either. Um, also, so yeah, you could put together those slow starts. You know, the dip in the good habits and the way that they've been playing their good hockey with the games where they were scoring the first goal, and they've started giving up the first goal also lately for most of the past recent games. I was looking at the data. I know that Martin St. Louis says, "Oh, we haven't played to our standards, but we had three points out of the last 3 games."
Mm-hmm.
If you go back to, let's say, the game against Toronto, so in their last 5 games, there is their expected goals against are the worst in the league. They're the second team that gave up the most goals, and they're the second team that gave up the most high danger chances.
This
So
is 5-on-5, right?
yeah,
It's 5-on-5.
yeah,
Yeah.
this 5-on-5. So um, it suggests that it's not necessarily. And even if you go back to the Utah game, there were wins in Utah and in Dallas, but the metrics there were not amazing either. So
Mm-hmm.
there's been warning signs, and it's good that they're approaching it. I think that there's no when in the opening of the show when you use the word lull, there's a difference between a lull and a slump, and
Yeah.
the Canadians are in a lull, but they're not in a slump, not yet. I mean, they can pay attention and make sure that they don't get into a slump, but this sort of regression was entirely expected. So you mentioned the more offensive oriented aspects of the practice, but there's also, I think that the coach is fully aware that the Canadiens cannot continue giving up all those scoring chances and hope to be successful, in the
Mm-hmm.
long run with that. And he said so after the game on Saturday. So yeah, I think that the rush defense is also an aspect where they really want to pay attention, because there was a lot of focus early in the year of how submerged they could get in their own end. And once the cycle got going, it was like a tornado in their own territory, and they had struggled, keeping the assignments clear and understood, and there was always a domino that made the other fall. But when you pay attention to killing the play at the blue line or high in the zone, just you prevent all that time that you spend in your own end. So in that sense, I think it's smart to be focusing on that. And if he does, it also means that he's comfortable with how his team is playing, even when they're deep in their own end. Because you take, for example, the Devils game. The Devils were very good at, finding little paths, little pockets of free eyes in the slot, and in that way, they were more effective in doing that than a lot of the opponents lately. So they
Mm-hmm.
created a lot of zone time, but for the most part, if you take more games than just the Devils game, they've been managing okay to at least keep the other team on the outside and not necessarily give a ton of grade A's. So I think that there's many little adjustments that can be made. But again, going back to our original point, it's good that there's not one huge weakness that it's engulfing the performances of that team right now.